Step back, puts up the three, got hit, shot's good, and one! James Harden double team, and a chance for a 4-point play.
Okay, welcome back to the DC pod. I am Christian, joined as always, Dallas diehard Darcy, where we cover all things basketball. So we've made it, Darcy, down to the last two teams. The other, how many is it? The other 14 teams have now gone home. NBA Finals kicks off tomorrow. So that's Wednesday, the 7th of July for those in Australia. And it's obviously the Bucks and the Suns, with Phoenix having the home court there. So how excited or not excited potentially are you by this series, Darcy?
I'm definitely excited. And okay. I think that there was a shock, I suppose, at the beginning of the conference finals when you're not going to see those historic all-time best players that you assume are just going to make it, like guys like LeBron and Curry and KD. You just assume that they're going to be there. And when we found out that they weren't even going to be in the conference finals, you're like, oh, that means we're not going to get something as good. But I think this will be super competitive. I really am tossing and turning over which way to go, over which team has the edge or which team I'm going to pick, because where these two teams or at least the Bucks, they've been there. They've been the best team in the regular season for the last 2 or 3 seasons. So to finally see them in the finals up against a team who's Phoenix, who are playing as well as anyone, it's, for me, it's getting juicier by the day.
Yeah, I'm same with you. I've struggled to be able to pick a clear winner, even though the Giannis injury is definitely going to play a factor, and we'll touch on that when we preview the finals. Yeah, I've really struggled to be confident in either side, really. So I think that then leans towards it just being a really competitive, great series, which is probably what we've been dying out for these playoffs, with injuries really playing their part in the first 3 rounds. It's kind of led us to, well, hopefully the finals is a really good battle, because we didn't get it with Brooklyn, Milwaukee, with obviously the injuries and that. We didn't get it with Lakers Phoenix. If you want to go back to the first round of that, so. There's been a bit of disappointment, but hopefully the finals can make up for what we've missed through the first 3 rounds. But before going into the finals, Darcy, we should touch on the respective conference finals and kick it off with the one that just happened the other day, with Milwaukee closing things out and winning in 6. Obviously, Giannis got injured. Was it the start of Game 4 or halfway through Game 4? Something like that, where he hyperextended his knee. And so then he didn't play either Game 5 or Game 6. So how did you? And then the Trae Young injury was at Game 3. I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? So I suppose how do you sum up that series in particular? Obviously, no one thought Atlanta would be there, but how did you sort of feel about that Eastern Conference Finals?
Well, I think when you look at the series as a whole and how Milwaukee were able to get it done, I think you can point to their backcourt and the performance of Middleton and of Holiday, particularly when Giannis went down. They really maintained their level or even stepped up their offensive output in those Game 5 and Game 6. And it was pretty special, when you see the way that Middleton went off in a couple of those fourth quarters. He really showed why he's a 2-time All-Star and why he should be considered, a legitimate second option. And also it really justifies why they went out and got Drew Holiday. I don't think that Milwaukee would have been able to get this far without adding that extra piece that they did in the off season. I think the longer as this season has gone on and the kind of the more comfortable and the better that Drew Holiday is playing, it just has really emphasized what an important trade that was in getting them to this next step. And I think they also got some good production from their role players. And I think that has partly to do with the fact that they're playing Atlanta in this conference finals rather than a juggernaut team like Brooklyn or Philly, who probably should have been there. The ability for guys like Lopez to, stay out there for close to 40 minutes in these important games and really give them production on both ends. Bobby Portis was huge for them in the series, average double figures, was able to take it to the matchups against guys like Gallinari. And they even got a little bit from Connaughton and even Jeff Teague in this final game. So I guess, the story for the Bucks is even with Giannis going down in, early in Game 4, they were able to rely and their depth was really able to get them over the line. I think on the flip side for Atlanta, it amazing season for them, great run to get to this point, and they were, they tried really hard in the closeout games with their backs up against the wall. But as soon as Trey went down with that injury, it it made it difficult for them because they really ran out of offensive options. They didn't, Lou Will was able to get them a game where he controlled it from the point guard position, but after that, they kind of really were at the mercy of the Bucks, and the Bucks felt like they had control of the tempo with Middleton and Holiday for basically the rest of the series. Gutsy effort from Trae Young to come out and play another game at the end, but you could tell he was just out of rhythm, similar to when CP3 missed a couple of games because of COVID. When he came back in that Clippers series, he looked, a bit slow. He wasn't quite on the pace, and it looked the same way with Young. He didn't look confident, going to the basket that he could really jump off and elevate off his ankle, and he just didn't have the touch from three. So I think the Hawks, as soon as he went down, I didn't really give them much of a chance to win the series, but saw some good stuff from Collins in particular in this series. He probably did enough to earn himself that big bag, and there's definitely some great signs for Atlanta, but in terms of Milwaukee, I think they're probably as primed and as good a position as they could possibly be going into the finals, minus Giannis's health.
Yeah, I kind of enjoy watching the Bucks more when Giannis isn't on the floor. The pace they play with and just the better spacing they have on offense, it's really enjoyable to watch. And I know you mentioned there off the top with Drew Holiday and that Bucks backcourt, but I swear when Drew's aggressive like he was there in Game 5 and then Game 6 to close things out, that takes him to a whole new level. That really elevates the team because very often it kind of looks like, he is a bit passive, looking for his own shot, and he sort of tries to be a more efficient player. But if he just gets the ball every time and has a head down mentality and gets to the rim, nobody can really stop him. And then when they sort of play him for the drive, that's when his outside shot really opens up. And I thought he was awesome. I know in the TNT broadcast how Charles Barkley was saying if Drew Holiday is aggressive, he thinks the Bucks can, win the NBA Finals. And I don't think it necessarily will come down to that. I think even if you get an aggressive Drew, similar to what we saw in 5 and 6 against Atlanta, it'll definitely make it a really compelling and interesting series. But I don't think that's the X factor for me. But I think it's great. And as you say, it does justify basically the package they gave to New Orleans to get him. And I suppose I've mentioned in a podcast or two in the past that the best thing about Drew Holiday was that he wasn't Eric Bledsoe, but it's, Drew playing like this is something that really presents actually a tough matchup for Phoenix because you're not going to put CP on him. You probably want to have Bridges on Middleton. If Giannis is back, who do you defend with him? Do you put Ayton on him? So I think as long as Drew stays this aggressive, it's actually, makes things really interesting. I think your point about Atlanta was spot on. They overachieved. No one thought they'd be there. The Trey injury was just a momentum killer. Who knows? Maybe Atlanta could have taken it 7 if Trey was healthy, given, how he was playing. And
the way that Cam Reddish came out and played, he wanted a Game 7.
Definitely. He was one of the few guys that wanted it. And, I actually thought John Collins, as good as he was, there's a missed opportunity there with Atlanta to feed him more. Like I thought he didn't really take that many shots if not having the Game 6 box score handy. I could have sworn out of all the guys that played big minutes for Atlanta, he would have been one of the he might have been the guy with the least amount of shot attempts. I reckon Gallinari had more, Reddish had more. How do you have it there?
Yeah, he only shot 9, and Bogdanovic, Young, Capella, Reddish, Gallinari all got over 10 attempts. So he was being efficient. Yeah, would have liked to have seen him shot the ball a little bit more. Because
he was getting some really good he seemed to anyway find himself a lot switched on to Drew Holiday. And obviously, as good a defender as Drew is, Collins was shooting the ball great with just facing up and rising up straight away. And he was making some difficult shots all series long, I thought. There's plenty of lean-ins and runners that he was just hitting. And obviously, you get his normal output rebounding the ball. But I just thought there was an opportunity there to potentially feed him. And even if a guy like Bobby Portis is going to be on Collins, you've got to find a way to punish, the Bucks for having Portis out there, with Portis being more an offensive player. So obviously a great season for Atlanta. I thought it was a bit of a missed opportunity with not being able to feed, feed Collins a bit more. Would you have, knowing what you know now and how you saw of Trey, but before we move on to the Western Conference Finals, would you have played Trey? I know it's like if it happened in Game 6 and Milwaukee won by 30 and they didn't play Trey Young. I know the obvious thing is, man, why didn't we play Trey, and the regret of not doing that. But knowing what we know now and how we saw Trey, wouldn't you have tried to run more of the offense through a Bogdanovic? And I know Herter's shot wasn't really falling this series. I thought he still did a good job playmaking. And more Collins, Capella was at least feisty and active in Game 6. He was doing a little bit more, running the floor hard. Certainly was in Game 4 as well. So just I look at that and go, I don't know. I get that Trey's out there playing, basically on one leg with his ankle. But he shot, 4 of 17, 4 of 18. So he wasn't super effective scoring the ball. He did still get his assists, if my memory serves correct. If he didn't get double digits, he was close. So I understand playing Trey, but would you have done it? Because I kind of lean towards no, but I understand why they did it.
Well, I think they've already, in the series, already played 2 games without him. And basically they were able to win one of those games with Lou Will controlling the game, scoring 20 points and dishing out 9 assists with no turnovers. So, that's basically, for me, that was the formula that was going to work without Trey on the floor. I don't think it would have been, necessarily a smart option to go and have Herter and Bogdanovic become the de facto point guards. I feel like you're taking a strength as them being wing players and being scorers and plugging into what was a temporary weakness with no point guard. I think in terms of playing Young in that last game, I think you've got to, I think you built an identity, and I feel like the whole team would have felt a lot more comfortable in Game 6 with Young out there, with him handling the ball and with him distributing. I think that's where they really found a rhythm and some continuity. And there's no doubt that they have massive trust that style of play is what's been successful for them. And I think that that familiarity in terms of having Young out there would have meant a lot more to the team's potential to win Game 6. But when you look at the way that Milwaukee played, they were too good. Atlanta missed quite a lot of shots in Game 6, but Milwaukee played at their tempo. They got everyone involved, multiple guys scoring in double figures. You got 30 from Middleton and almost 30 from Holiday. That's all-star level players showing up big in a big game, and they just came and took that game. They took the series away from Atlanta. Atlanta got a huge game from Reddish, 6 or 7 threes. They're probably extremely lucky to be getting that as well. We talked about the struggles from Huerta. I think that was a good adjustment from McMillan to go to Reddish because of Huerta's struggles. He was put some trust in the young kid, and for me, that's probably as deep as you can go. You can't. You don't want to be going down in a Game 7 playing Lou Williams 35 minutes up against Holiday and Middleton. Like, it's just a lot to ask, and I think they did the right thing playing Young. And I'm also glad that it doesn't seem like it's that significant of an injury. And I feel like Trey Young reminds me of guys like Steph Curry in terms of having small guard, lots of quickness, lots of jumping, lots of movement. I hope they don't continue to have, ankle injuries going on through their career. It's something that could probably, potentially hobble a guy like Trey Young, given his size and stature. But I hope that he can kind of get over that and have a healthy career, because it's looking like this Atlanta team is going to be a team to be feared. They've got a couple of decisions to make in the offseason, but with the youth of their roster, I think they're in a really good situation to potentially come and compete for the East again next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And they obviously re-signed McMillan. That news dropped, I think, overnight, that he's now got a 4-year deal and he's no longer the interim, and he's the main man running that team moving forward. So it'd be, obviously the future's bright with them, and they actually get an off season with McMillan and a training camp with him, because it feels like a while ago, but it was only middle way through the season where they moved on from Lloyd Pierce. Was it before the All-Star break or just after the All-Star break where they moved on from Pierce and brought in McMillan? So to be able to do this and get to the conference finals with with a coach that comes, takes over the reins halfway through the season. It's pretty impressive.
If there was one position or one piece you reckon they could add to the formation of this roster right now, who do you think would be best for them, or what kind of player should they target for this group for next season?
They seem to have at least two deep at every position, to be honest. So it's hard to pick a particular. It's hard to sort of pinpoint a particular spot, but I think the kind of guy they need is just a veteran. That would be good. I get the understanding of signing Rondo last off season and bringing him in to try and mentor Trey, and maybe that did have a good impact and a positive impact. But in terms of on court with Rondo, it clearly didn't work, so that's why they had to move on from him. But if there's a veteran piece out there that's got some experience that can really help in that locker room, I think that would be a priority one. It doesn't really matter what position that person plays, because the list of wings that they have goes on and on. I don't know if they'd ever look to sort of speed up the process and maybe package a couple of their wings to try and get a really dominant two-way.
An all-star?
Get an all-star. Because I don't know how old Trey is. It's probably not a priority at the moment anyway, but I suppose if Trey's this good, you may as well try and build around him while you can. And he's obviously his extension's coming up. So do you have an answer to that, to your own question? Because I don't know what position they should look to. It'd be so dumb if they let Collins go. I think both you and I can admit that. But so it's hard to, and they have Gallo obviously there as a backup spot. Do you get another power forward in? Because Gallo was pretty healthy. So. He's not normally that healthy.
Yeah, you're right. Well, in the regular season, he didn't really help them out much. Hey, he kind of only came good at the end of the regular season, and then was absolutely massive for them at some moments in the playoffs. I think he's got one more year on the deal. He signed a 2-year deal with them, so he's definitely a guy that you want. But I think probably position wise, you just need a little bit more backup on the defensive end in the forward position. Capella was absolutely an Iron Man for them the whole season. Like, I feel like he didn't miss a beat in any game the whole season. He basically gave them exactly what they needed. And Collins, he's young and you can definitely rely on him. They need to get him back. We liked what we saw from Okongwu. You would assume that he's going to have a bigger role in the lineup, in the rotation next season. I think he might be a little bit undersized playing the center position. So maybe, every team would love to have a little bit more size on the bench. So I think that's probably a priority for them. And I think they need to make a decision on terms of what they're doing at backup point guard, because Lou Will's a good guy to have, but a guy who for whatever reason, injury-wise, did not ever have an impact was Dunn, Chris Dunn, a guy who was an interesting piece and was a starter for Chicago last year, basically the whole season. And yeah, obviously injuries made a big point about that, but is he a reliable backup point guard that they're going to use next season and going into the playoffs? That's probably a big question for them. And, it's a point guards league. There's hundreds of good point guards out there in the NBA. So I think that's probably a backup point guard is the position that they probably need to address.
Yeah, that's a good call. And then we always forget about the fact that, Hunter didn't even play this series. So, and he only played one game of the Philly series, if that. So, that's obviously another piece there that you'd expect him to slide back into that starting lineup come next season, and then probably pushes Herder to the bench. You'd assume they'd go a Trey, Bogdanovich, Hunter, Collins, Capella, right, to start off that next year again. So interesting to see what they do, but the future is bright. I mean, what are they, 2 years ahead of where we thought they'd be? No one really thought they'd be at the conference finals. So definitely ahead of schedule, and interesting to see what they do. They have a lot of flexibility anyway with the pieces they've sort of got if they want to decide to package a couple of them with potentially a pick and try and come up with, as you say, an all-star level player or a fringe all-star level player if a couple of their young guys can nab that type of talent anyway. The one thing I'll say about Bobby Portis before we move on is I saw a quote from him actually, because he always has the eyes is whenever he makes a big play. In college, he has a quote when he played for Arkansas. He said before games, he would picture the opponent slapping his mum, and that's how he would get fired up. Which makes complete sense, doesn't it? It totally adds up that he's that sort of guy. That's what he would use as like motivation to make sure he comes out with, great energy and plays with the zest and the way he does. Because even trying to tip an offensive, board to himself, and it ends up going out of bounds, but it still earns Milwaukee another possession. He's bumping up the crowd. He's like, hands are up, and it's like, it wasn't even that big of a play. It's halfway through, the second quarter. Like, who really cares? But he's just always seems to be some sort of energizer bunny, it's great to see. I really enjoy watching him, and I've said I'd love to get him on Philly somehow as our backup five. That sort of energy I think most teams can use. I know he's not great defensively, but I just love his energy. I think that stuff's infectious.
He was definitely miscast in his role at New York. He was playing like the starting 3 spot for them last season, and that really did not work out. And and I think Coach Bud deserves some credit because he's perfectly slotted into that, backup 4, backup 5 position for them. He's obviously a good stretch outside shooter as well, and he's got enough size in the paint to do some damage. So, if you look at his numbers throughout the season, he's close to a double-double on average. I think he's like 13 points and 8 rebounds, which is very efficient for a backup forward. So it's been a good season from him. And we talked about it a little bit on the pod that we thought he could have been used a little bit more in the Brooklyn series, but he seems to have got his confidence up now, and then be interested to see what kind of leash that Coach Bud gives him in this series, because he could definitely have a role.
Yeah. Okay, so the other conference finals, the West. So again, another team winning in 6. That was Phoenix. That obviously news. It feels like again forever ago, but it's right. We go over it. And CP3 missed the first 2 games and came back. Looking back at the series now, just as a quick summary, it definitely feels like the game 2. The valley oop and 8 and getting that to end the game was pretty brutal for the Clippers, and it's probably going to come back to haunt them in the end, because they would have loved to nab that and steal one on the road, because it just didn't seem like they really had much energy in this game 6, did it? I mean, it seemed like a lot of their guys were tired, and look, rightly so. I'm sure they wouldn't use it as an excuse, and no one is, but it's just a fact. They've played 3 tough series where they predominantly played small ball, and a lot of their guys on the floor were doing more than you normally would, with obviously playing, switch everything. And, a couple of their guys, Morris or PG or even Kawhi, when he was healthy, having to guard some 7-footers and, battle down low with bigs, boxing out for rebounds, even just trying to get the ball off a missed shot seemed to be an effort. So, but before talking about Phoenix, I'd probably say the credit to the Clippers that they did a great job to make it through to the conference finals, and they gave it their all. It's definitely positive moving into next season when you get healthy Kawhi back, and you get a guy like Ibaka back as well. I think that's another underrated sort of storyline for the Clippers, that they didn't really have him healthy at all. I think he might have played, was it 1 game in that first round series against you guys? I can't even remember if he played any more than that first game, but I thought Beverly was awesome in this series. I know a lot of people hate him, and yes, he can be a dirty guy. And, I thought he did a great job defending Booker. I know Booker obviously went off in game 1 and had the 40-point triple-double, but Beverly made him work from then on out. It sort of seemed like. So for me, it probably came down to CP3 that changed the series and put the team on his back, because I thought Beverly was doing a hell of a job on Booker. So that's really the couple of key things. And you'd assume they'd bring back Reggie. Probably a more of a team-friendly deal. I think they can somehow get to, if I was reading it correctly, 8 to 9 range per season, if they could bring him back on a maybe 2-year, $20 million deal or something like that, which to me would seem like it could be enough to bring back Reggie and to definitely at least get his money, but still be in a winning situation and a team that he wants to be on, rather than, I think I mentioned it to you before, that he could go and really get the bag and get his last big contract of his career. But you pushed back with a strong point that, that'll probably mean he'll go to a bottom team. So, I think there's definitely opportunity to bring a guy like Reggie back and see what that team can really do. And hell of a postseason for Ty Lue. I think it goes without saying, if people forgot about how good of a coach he was in his days with Cleveland, they've certainly been reminded now after this postseason. So similar to Atlanta, I think there's obviously a lot to build off, and there's a lot to be excited about heading into next year.
No, you're definitely right. They found something in this playoff run for sure. The Clippers, they found a real identity with this group, with with this particularly doing a lot of things small ball wise, but also just their overall identity of, extremely good defensively, a real jump shooting threat team who, if they get on top of you defensively and they're shooting the 3 ball well, they can knock out anyone. They really can. And it had to be emphasized with the fact that, Kawhi didn't play one game in this series against Phoenix, and at times Phoenix were on the edge. Clippers pushed them to, in game 1, had a great chance to win it. Game 2, you talked about the value, that was basically the difference in the game. It was incredibly tight. Game 3, the Clippers completely blew them out. It was only when they kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the series where Phoenix were able to take control. And I think, if you add a guy like Kawhi, a healthy Kawhi Leonard into this matchup, I think you probably get a different result. You really think the Clippers are destined probably to go all the way to the championship. And I think that's probably, for as quiet as everything is about Kawhi, it's also a bit puzzling, how he doesn't give us, the media or anyone, any information about what's going on. And then he's sitting up there in the stands watching the game with a stone face. It's all a bit odd, and it kind of makes you think, how difficult it is to really have a superstar best player like him on your team and him be the identity of the team, because you're really unsure of what's going on. And it's really, you couldn't imagine that he'd be, opening up to the players on his team and they'd all be 100% sure of what he's thinking. So I suppose that takes its own challenge, but I still think that he'll be signing back with the Clippers and they'll be running this back and maybe making a couple of tweaks because, they're right there. And although they don't necessarily have the biggest window, Paul George has signed up long term. And they've definitely found something with a couple of their veterans that they've picked up to. I think Batum could probably go around again. He was big for them this season. You mentioned Beverly. He had a bit of rejuvenation in this playoffs in terms of his value and what he can do. They definitely found something in Terrence Mann as well as a role player. Came down to earth a little bit offensively in this series. Phoenix really locked it up, made it difficult for him to put up any kind of decent point scores. And Paul George, he's really gotten that monkey off his back about, not being able to perform in the playoffs. I think he'll be as confident as anyone next season that if they get to the playoff situation, that he can be big for them and help them close out a series. I thought Marcus Morris, for a lot of the question marks we have about him over the season and the contract that he had, he really stepped up for them in lots of big moments. He was absolutely huge in Game 6. He was their best player, no doubt, and he was big in Game 7 against the Mavericks. He was practically the reason that we lost as well. So I think he's ended up earning his money in that right. And probably, from their bench, I think Luke Kennard gave them some really nice stuff as well. I would expect him to be an even bigger part of their team next year. And they're paying him enough money that he has to be a big part of it. But I like what they're doing. I think Ibaka is a big question mark because they spent their mid-level exception on him, and expect for him, for them to spend that exception on him and for him to be a literal zero impact in their playoff run is very disappointing. You think with him out there on the floor, he would have been a really nice matchup if fit to go up against Ayton. So I'm pretty sure he's locked into the contract for next season. So he needs to be fit and healthy. They can't afford to not get anything out of him again next year. That'll just be too big a waste of money for them. But I think he would fit great, if he's ready to go. So Clippers are in a great stead for next season. You can't help it with the injuries, but this championship was there for the taking if they were able to get Kawhi fit. So it's just a bit unlucky for them, but overall a very positive season. And I think their Reggie Jackson question definitely is quite big for them because they definitely need him.
Yeah, I still can't get over. Literally, it used to be, you'd hide in a corner when he would have the ball in ISO, worried about just how disastrous the offensive possession could be for the team. And it suddenly flipped to, you expecting him to get a bucket when he had the ball in isolation and he was one-on-one. Because he was doing it all. He was getting to the rim and, in the series against Utah, he was attacking Gobert in Game 6. And it just seemed like he wasn't scared and he was hitting step-back threes and he was just doing it all. So phenomenal. And he was doing it while wearing those goggles the whole postseason as well, the glasses. So it's clearly something that didn't affect him.
In the closeout game, played big 36 minutes. They're relying on him for crazy big minutes in this series.
Yeah.
He obviously showed offensively that he could score the ball, scored really well all series. He struggled with his shot in the final game, but dropped 8 assists with no turnovers. So he was just playing all around game on a high level. And it's crazy because they picked him up off of a buyout. So good stuff from the Clippers there.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely changed my thinking about him, and I definitely think he's changed how people perceive him and view him going into next season. Okay, so the finals now, Das, the big one, the preview. So
Huge.
Before we jump into 3 things that we'll touch on with the series being one matchup you like to see or your favorite matchup, the X factor, and then the prediction at the end before speaking about some Olympic stuff. So to preface this finals preview, so the regular season, Phoenix and Milwaukee played twice. Phoenix won by 1 point in both of them, but I really only think you can take a sample and use that for this series in the second game, because the first game, Kaminsky started for Phoenix, played 38 minutes in that game. Drew didn't even play in that game, and Milwaukee didn't have PJ Tucker at that sort of stage. So that was sort of a more of an earlier regular season matchup. So it's hard to really take much and draw much from that and use it to try and predict what will happen, tomorrow and throughout the whole series. And then game 2, so that went to OT. That was in Milwaukee. That was obviously a great battle. But even that was 3 months ago. That game was April 4th. So again, it's the best we've got to work with at the moment. And I suppose that adds to further intrigue about the way the series will go, and even makes, us as NBA fans really excited about the thought of game 1 tomorrow to try and get a better idea of, how it'll all pan out. But I think it's really hard to look to any of these regular season games and take much away from it. I don't know if you are in the same thinking with me.
I think you can't necessarily read into those results too much, but what you can look at is the matchups and how these two teams match up with each other. And I think when you look at the size of Milwaukee and their starting lineup, especially if Giannis is in there and he's fit, I think it's a huge matchup problem for Phoenix. Phoenix have been an excellent defensive team, especially in the playoffs, but with the size of Giannis, the stretching the floor ability of Lopez to potentially drag Ayton outside the paint a little bit. And obviously you touched on Drew Holiday's ability to post smaller guards, and Phoenix have got a lot of them, between Chris Paul and Campaign, that sounds like a couple of guys that Holiday could go at. And the zone that Middleton's in right now, you could argue is just as good, if not better than the zone that Booker's been in over this playoff run. So some extremely interesting matchups. And I think the one that leans the most towards Milwaukee is if Giannis is fit, how are they going to stop him? Who's going to be able to stay on the floor and stay out of foul trouble and stop him? So I think a lot of that hinges on not only his health, but that matchup between him and, I suppose, a lot of time with Jay Crowder trying to stop him, or Mikal Bridges if they try to use a little bit more length and a little bit less strength. But I think that's difficult given the size of Giannis. And I think, from a matchup standpoint, that's kind of a take you could have a look at how they match up well with each other. But on the flip side of it, when you're looking at form and who in the playoffs, which team looks the most connected, which team looks like they're trusting in what they're doing, and which team looks like they won't waver at the signs of stuff going wrong, I think you would give a little bit of an edge to Phoenix, the way that they've been so together over this run so far. I feel like they have an extreme trust in what they're doing. I feel like they're not the type of team who will be abandoning their offensive game plan anytime soon. And when you have the kind of success that they had, in closeout games in all 3 of their series so far, I think they're a team. To me, there's less question marks about what we're going to get from Phoenix, and there's a little bit of a question mark that Milwaukee could basically not show up for a game or 2. Like we saw how they didn't show up in game 4 of the series against Atlanta, and the opening couple of games against the series in Brooklyn, they were really nowhere to be found. But credit to them, they were able to right the ship and play some really good basketball. But there's that toss up between, is this a really good matchup for some of Milwaukee's elite players to have the advantage in one-on-one matchups, or are Milwaukee still got those question marks on the back of their mind? And Phoenix is a team who look like they're primed and ready for 6 or 7 of the best games of the season, and could they go all the way? So yeah, there's plenty of ways that you can spin it. It's very, very difficult to make a pick at this stage, but you also got to consider that it's a 7-game series, in the finals, the storylines from game to game become so much more pronounced in the finals than they were in previous series. They're now, both these teams are used to playing big series, are used to taking the other team's best shot, realizing what the other team's really good at, game planning for them, and then going on through the series, making adjustments. That's obviously the key in playoffs, but now that we're in the finals, the storylines become way more pronounced, and some of the most dramatic moments in NBA history have happened in the finals, and you just want to know which team will be able to capture those moments and, I suppose, not be thrown off when something goes completely wrong.
Yeah, that's you brought up a lot there, and I think the main thing that I kind of take away is, gosh, Milwaukee are just huge, aren't they, with their lineup? If Giannis is back compared to Phoenix, it just feels, if Drew Holiday is the smallest guy in a Drew, Middleton, PJ, Giannis, and Lopez starting lineup, Drew's still 6'4", 6'5". Like that's definitely as you say, a mismatch that it presents there for Phoenix. But then obviously Phoenix potentially have some more playmakers and some more scoring and some more versatility that they can get from their not only wings that start, but the depth they have as well. So it brings into question whether, and this guy is actually a part of my X factor. So I couldn't really decide, and they're both with Milwaukee. I couldn't decide which two, so I had down a couple, which we'll get to. But I think my matchup that I've picked, the one I'm looking at, not that they'll necessarily be defending each other. And look, maybe they will at times due to how both teams and modern basketball involves a lot of switching. But I think as the primary defensive matchup, I don't think these two will see each other a terrible amount. But Drew against CP3, so the battle of the point guards. Both former New Orleans players, which is sort of funny to think about. They both obviously play really hard, compete hard, high IQ individuals. You'd say Chris Paul is the better playmaker, but I think people are underrating Drew's playmaking in that sort of battle as well. I know obviously CP3 is the point guard, but Drew multiple times has double-digit assists throughout the season and almost has just as much impact on that side of the ball that he does defensively in certain games. And just take her from Game 6, PJ Tucker was defending Trae Young to start the game, and many possessions, and that was, I think, not only a focus to try and slow down Bogdanovic, but save Drew for offense, because they understood his importance on that side of the ball, especially with Giannis, being out. The team really relied on him and Middleton to play, 40 plus minutes in both Game 5 and 6 to really close those two out. So that'll be interesting. I don't really think CP3. Well, you never know, but I'd like to think CP3 is past the moments too big for him type games, and the chokes he's potentially had in the past. Feels like he's sort of matured too much, and he's over that, and he's just too good of a guy, too smart, too crafty. So that I probably was wrong in saying they won't see a ton of each other. It's more likely than not you'll see a lot of Drew on CP3, but I don't think you'll see a terrible amount of CP3 on Drew. I think that Monty Williams is so smart of a coach that he'll probably look to avoid any of those situations, because the only real way that CP3 can probably stop Drew is if he has to defend him posting up, is probably fouling him. And it's obviously not a great thing that if CP3 is not on the floor. We know Campaign's good. You mentioned him before, but if CP3's there, you want him on the court playing big minutes in NBA finals, not having to sit him due to foul trouble. So there's definitely some back and forth there that that should be monitored. So that's probably what I'm looking for the most. I think CP3 will be great. I struggle to see how he won't be good, but I think that battle at the point guard spot between him and Drew will be pretty intriguing, and definitely one I'll be keeping an eye on.
I think you're right. I think, it's huge. CP3 has undoubtedly, I think Booker was probably the MVP of that first round series against the Lakers, but the last two series, it's been Chris Paul who's put the dagger in, who's dominated the closeout game. I think already had 36 against Denver in that closeout game with a series of elite mid-range jump shooting, just destroying the drop coverage. That was a bit of a masterpiece. And then he goes 7 of 8 from three to close out against the Clippers. 7 of 8 from three from Chris Paul. That's showing something. That's Hall of Fame good, and the way that he closed out that series. But you're right. CP3 is huge. It's absolutely massive. Can he bring his best hoops? His best offensive game to this series against an elite defensive unit? It's a big, big question. I think no doubt he'll have a great series. It just, can he be all-time great? Because both these teams are really good. There's a reason they're both in the finals. So you could play amazing and still not pull it out. It's, a lot is on his shoulders, but that's the way he plays. He has the ball in his hands the whole game. He's the one who controls what they're doing offensively. So he can't shy away from that. He has to continue to shoot the ball and try to be aggressive. He can't afford to play passive and not shoot the ball. He has to be aggressive and put the pressure right back on Holiday. I think Holiday has already proven his worth, and I think the pressure is definitely on Paul to perform. And on the other side, everything you get from Holiday is an absolute bonus. How good can he be? Can he be a championship point guard? It's a great opportunity for him to really cement himself, because he's always been one of those underrated players who you never thought could be there in the final situation. So huge matchup for him, and he's guarded all the best guards so far in the playoffs through Holiday. So it's just another day at the office for him when it comes to the point guard in that matchup. That'll be super intriguing. I think for me, the matchup that stood out for me is the shooting guard matchup. And I think these two will go head to head, matching each other, is D-Book and Chris Middleton. Booker has kind of, made himself into probably the number one pick in his draft class. He was a guy picked mid in the first round who's come off as an absolute lottery steal. The way he's been scoring the ball this season, definitely went a little bit under the radar because of what a polarizing figure that Chris Paul is. But, I had him in third team All NBA. I thought he was good enough to show that he's been in one of the best guards in the season. And, that I have lots of love, and we both have a lot of appreciation for Middleton. We both thought he probably should have been in the All-Star team, despite, not doing anything too outrageous. He's just cruising along, scoring over 20 a game on almost 50, 40, 90. So he's a special player, and he's really getting an opportunity to show just how good he is here. It's crazy that we've got, two leading scorers on these two teams that have never been in this moment, and, have never really tasted anything close to the finals, and now they're matching off for a chance to make history. It'd be a great matchup, and we're talking about two elite jump shooting guards. Like the two guys have mid-range game like you wouldn't believe. If they can take any player on the court one-on-one and get off a high-quality mid-range shot. So be interesting to see which one of those two guys comes out on top, or whether they'll kind of cancel each other out. I think the key is the quality of 3-point shots that those two can get generated for them, because when they're open, we know they're dead eyes. And I think the 3-point game will be an absolutely huge differential in every single game. Whichever team can knock down more threes and get more quality looks is going to go a long way to winning the matchup. So between those two, I want to see who can get the best looks for three, and I think that'll probably give them the advantage overall in the series, because they're both dead eye scorers. And I think probably the X factor leading on from that in particular is who might assist in guarding those guys. I think for, both these teams actually have a defensive stopper that they can put on. I think for Milwaukee, obviously PJ Tucker, everyone knows what his role is. And you talked about who Chris Paul might guard. If Tucker plays a lot of minutes, then I'm sure Paul will be helping off him and just kind of standing on him in the corner. But Tucker's done a really good job, and if he can get into Devin Booker's head and try to stop him from scoring efficiently, then that's a huge plus for the Bucks. And I think on the flip side, I think Monty Williams really discovered a little something with playing Torrey Craig quite a lot in that closeout game against the Clippers. for all the hard work that Jay Crowder does, I think he might have a bit of his hands full with a guy like Giannis. So I think unleashing a guy like Torrey Craig to give them a few minutes and potentially try to nullify some of the great things that Chris Middleton does will be an important factor for the Suns. You know, these two teams, they're number 1 and 2 in defense in the playoffs. You know, they haven't been at their very best offensively so far in the playoffs, but defensively is where their calling cards have been made. They're both the best two teams defensively in stopping fast breaks. So I think we're going to see a lot of grinded out half court D. And, you know, I think these X factors will come from these two defensive specialists from each team.
Yeah, that's really good. I think to go back to sort of your matchup and how you spoke about Middleton, it came across for me as sort of an X factor, because I know we'll see Bridges, and I suppose
it's always low key, Middleton. It's always low key that he's just one of the best.
Well, that's the thing with him. I compare him to Paul George in the fact that they're both very smooth and that they're never in a rush. And when they're both on and getting buckets, it just looks so effortless, and it's really good to see. And it's just absurd, you know, how easy they make things look. But then on the flip side, when the ball's not going in the hoop and they're throwing some pretty sloppy passes, it just looks really bad because of their style of play is just very laid back and relaxed. So a sort of double-edged sword with that one. But when they're on, there's nothing better because, you know, it doesn't look like they're breaking a sweat when they performing, getting buckets. So I think it's sort of a really key point you mentioned there with that particular battle. I know Booker gets a lot of his points from pick and rolls and potentially a little bit in the mid-range there, but it's more with, Booker does get a little bit in isolation, but I'd say it's more Middleton who gets his points in isolation. They don't do a terrible amount of pick and rolls, and anyone that's tuned into the Bucks postseason has known that, you know, Bud has definitely gone to an ISO type style of play, and it changed a little bit when Giannis went down, but I think it's how effective can Milwaukee defend that Phoenix pick and roll, because if it's not with CP, it's with Booker. So how can they slow down that?
I think we can safely assume that this series is gonna, you know, it's gonna take shape quite quickly, and I think that we're gonna see a lot of ball that was similar to what we saw midway and towards the end of the Brooklyn series, like when both teams are extremely locked in defensively. I touched on how good both of these teams have been on D. I think it's gonna be very difficult to run a lot of their plays in the half court and have the other team not know exactly what they're going to and have game plan for it. So I think you will see a lot of plays not being called and teams just kind of relying on playing. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that it becomes a bit stagnant. And if guys aren't making shots, then it can really hinder them. But at the same time, it can be very difficult to defend when the ball's flinging around for Milwaukee and their shooters are really getting involved. And on the flip side, you know, when Phoenix are able to get their shooters involved, particularly, you know, they can be so deadly. I think something that was key to them closing out the game was kind of the way that Jake Crowder played. He was so free, and he basically was ready to launch every time he caught the ball. I think he hit 6 threes in the first half, so that really opened up the floor for CP to eventually come in and dominate the game. So it'll be really interesting to see how these teams, you know, defend each other and kind of that chess match of how are we going to continually get good looks at the basket, because, you know, two great defensive teams, it's going to take, you know, a lot of really, really small adjustments and some big performances, particularly shooting the ball for one team to come out on top. What do you think about the challenge for DeAndre Ayton? Obviously, he's stepped up to the challenge in all 3 series so far, and he's come up against, you know, a plethora of different players. But you could also make the argument that, you know, teams have been hindered. Some of the teams that he's played against, obviously, Anthony Davis went out early in their series and didn't exactly look himself. You know, Andre Drummond was very average in that series. Jokic obviously is a beast, but their whole team, I suppose, wasn't able to get it done offensively, and they were able to sweep them easily. And then, you know, Zubac had a couple of really good games against Ayton before getting injured and then being out for the rest of that series. So he was luckily playing against like power forwards and Nick Batum guarding him and Morris guarding him and Noah Ibaka as well. So definitely a big challenge because Brook Lopez is looking like he's playing his best ball of the season right now, which is scary for a guy like Aiton. How do you think he'll fare in that matchup?
It's a great point to bring up. I think that's very hard to predict how Aiton will go. Obviously, it's going to be his toughest challenge, that's for sure. And you're right. If Brook Lopez hasn't played as well as he's played, I don't think the Bucks would sort of be in the position they are. I know we sort of spoke about the backcourt and of the Bucks, but he put up 33 in that game 5, and he didn't even attempt one outside three when that's sort of what his game has been, known since he's come across to the Bucks. So it was definitely a real key. It was definitely a priority for him to attack the basket with no Giannis on the floor there in that game 5.
I think him and Holiday are connecting well together, and that's become a key part of his good play lately.
Definitely, there's a symmetry between the two that's developed really nicely. So yeah, it's going to be tough for Aiton. He's definitely going to be reliant on can he outwork some of these, whether it be a Bobby Portis or a PJ Tucker to get some offensive rebounds and to create some baskets himself, because I think the opportunities will be limited for him to try and score. Otherwise, probably be pretty reliant on, getting some passes from CP or Booker that draw a lot of the attention. I can't see a terrible amount of, post-ups for Aiton being called. It's certainly what they haven't done throughout the playoffs. So that may be a wrinkle that Monty Williams has. But it's tough against Lopez anyway to be able to back him down and get a good look. And he's done a phenomenal job defending the rim anyway. He definitely outplayed Capella, not only offensively, but defensively as well. I think there were plenty of games where he had more blocks than him in that series. So yeah, it'll be tough for Aiton. I think the key is he just has to stay big, stay dominant, stay active around the rim, and just keep if there's going to be a thing that he can target, it's probably getting quick baskets in transition, right? So hoping that the defense can force long shots, and he's just got to run the floor and get past Lopez. And I think that's probably what you've got to hope out of Aiton. And if CP or Book get cooking out of that pick and roll, and Lopez and the primary defender on whoever that guard is start to pay him more attention, then Aiton can be there to benefit from that. So I know Milwaukee did a lot of drop coverage, and it seemed like everyone did drop coverage against Trae Young in the playoffs. But if Milwaukee decide to do that and hope that they can force CP3 and potentially Booker into making some of those awkward type range shots, not really mid-range, not really floaters, just sort of that awkward range. And we know CP3 is awesome at that, but if they struggle, then there's no reason for Milwaukee to change. So that can make it difficult for Aiton to get involved. But I think it just comes down to him and his effort. That's probably the best way he can stay involved and stay dominant, even if it's not scoring himself, just getting offensive rebounds and still doing a good job protecting the rim. Because I know we sort of speak about him offensively, but I thought he's had a good playoff series defensively as well, and staying pretty active on that side of the ball and making it difficult for any of these. If you want to look at the Clippers series, like he did a great job of making sure that the Clippers couldn't play him off the floor. I know a couple of times, as you say, whether it was game 3 where the Clippers just sort of blew him off the court with their shooting, or game 5 where the Clippers never say die attitude just sort of willed him to that victory. But you could never really say Aiton was unplayable in that series, could you? Because you definitely could with Gobert in the Utah Clippers series. So I think that's a credit to Aiton. And it's just going to be about his effort. There's not going to be many plays run for him. We've spoken about that. So it's kind of all on him, and it'll be a great challenge. But I think he'll be able to hold his own. He might not ball out, but or have a game that we remember in this finals as being the Aiton game. But I think he can still hold his own and compete and be a pretty important piece. I definitely don't think he'll be a liability for the team. That's for sure.
No, I think you're right. I think he's shown enough for us to be confident that he can still do what he's been doing offensively around the basket. In the pick and roll, he's shown the ability to catch it in the paint, turn and score quickly, and his touch has been excellent. You see the way he's shooting the ball in the playoffs. It's awesome. It's you definitely think that could translate into some more success in this series, and him continuing to score the ball in double figures. I think you're right about, and what I'm probably most concerned about with him potentially is his ability to stay on the floor defensively. He's been great. He hasn't had any problem staying on the floor so far in the playoffs, and he was really good at contesting shots at the rim, whether it was guys like Terrence Mann and Beverly and Paul George at times, especially in the end of that last series. He kind of just ran out of gas and was too tired of attacking Ayton at the rim, and that's a credit to what Ayton's done so far. But if Giannis is playing and he's getting downhill the way that we know he can, he is completely unstoppable. If he can get to that MVP level and start to dominate the tempo of the game and get downhill, I think that potentially spells trouble for Ayton and for Crowder. Can they both stay on the floor and not get in foul trouble? We saw some, Blake Griffin was in a similar position, undersized, trying to stop Giannis. At times, Griffin did a great job, and it ended up in them getting easy wins. But when he was in foul trouble, the Game 7, he got in foul trouble, and on the road against Milwaukee, he got in foul trouble a couple of times as well. He just tried to take a couple of charges, got the block call, and that's what Giannis forces you to do. So I think that's probably a big area of emphasis for Ayton. You've got to make sure he stays on the floor and is able to somehow stay out of foul trouble while trying to stop the Greek Freak, because I think ultimately, that's probably what could be the difference in the series. If Giannis is going to play at an MVP level and score, over 30 points and get 15 rebounds like he's been doing basically every game of the playoffs, then that's going to be a really tough matchup for the Phoenix front court, because, you and I have talked about this throughout the season, what our question mark is their depth in the front court. Can we trust Saric as a backup? We don't want to see really any Kaminsky on the floor, defensively. That'd be very difficult for them. So I'm not sure if this series really is a good one for Saric either. Can he match up against many of these guys if Ayton does have to hit the bench? So I think that's an important key. And if Milwaukee can get him in any kind of foul trouble, that'd be huge for them.
Yeah. So the final thing I'd probably speak about before we give out our final predictions is so my X factor. So I know I mentioned Middleton, but probably more important to me is a guy like Pat Connaughton, I think, for Milwaukee. I know people have obviously forgotten about Dante DiVincenzo's injury and kind of the piece he was and importance to that starting lineup, and knowing his role in the team and making outside shots and, cutting to the rim off Giannis passes, and then also being able to, defend multiple positions. So him missing the court is huge. And I think given what we see tomorrow with Game 1, it might be something where Bud, look, this is me assuming that Bud will decide to make adjustments. So obviously with that in mind, if we quickly realize that playing big isn't the right call and Phoenix are getting their way and getting pretty easy looks, then maybe you see a pretty quick adjustment where Connaughton's in there with that main group for, a lot of the game. Because if there's one thing he does offer, it's rebounding and defensive versatility, and then he spaces the floor and offense shooting. So he's kind of in that DiVincenzo mold where he knows his role, and you won't really see him go outside of that and try to do more than he's needed. So I think, especially with the list of wings that Phoenix has, whether it's Booker, Bridges, Crowder, Torrey Craig that you've just mentioned, Cam Johnson.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys there that are in that position that Connaughton can come in and defend. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of role he plays. I think if he can play well, man, I know it's not the be-all and end-all, but I think that'll go a long way to really helping, Milwaukee be able to find a way to win this series. I know a lot of people are on Phoenix. Phoenix are already the favorites, I think, to win the series. I think they're $1.60 on Sportsbet. So the way kind of everyone's leaning at the moment is Phoenix. But I think with this preview in general, it goes without saying that you and I expect Giannis to play tomorrow in Game 1. Do you not?
Yeah, I think so. I expect so. He's such a tough guy. I expect him to play.
Yeah, so there was news that dropped that if that Atlanta-Milwaukee series was going to go to 7, that in all likelihood Giannis would have played that Game 7. So we can probably safely assume that now they've had another 4 or 5 days off, that he's going to be ready to go for Game 1. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of Giannis we get, because we know all of these guys that have come back and tried to play through injuries and, with Trae Young being the latest example, haven't been their normal self. with Giannis relying so much on his athleticism, what sort of impact do you think he will make? Because we haven't touched on him a terrible amount in today's podcast. How do you think he'll look, and what do you sort of make of the whole question mark around his sort of injury? And because it's been at least a week since he's played, maybe 10 days that he last took the floor in Game 4. So how do you see things with Giannis?
He'll definitely be out of rhythm a little bit, and what I really, if I'm a Bucks fan, what I don't want to see is him settling for jumpers. It might mean some ugly offensive possessions, particularly in the half court, but he has to get his head down to the basket game really going. I think the way to get that going is through defense in transition. I've touched on it before, like if they're able to get stops defensively and he's able to get down the floor in any kind of momentum and get the ball on a fast break and throw down one of those, typical signature Giannis dunks, that's absolutely the key to him and their whole team playing the right way and having the energy and the force to win the game. So I think that's probably where the key will be, getting a few stops early, making sure they're able to shut down Phoenix's flowing offense and then get out in transition. That's absolutely the key for him, I think. And in the half court, not settling, not shooting any threes. If anything, back some of these Phoenix guys down and give them a little turnaround shot. I think that's important for Giannis. I think we'll probably see some sloppiness from him in his first game back. We've seen it from guys who have missed a couple of games, and you can't say enough for the rhythm that you lose watching a couple of games from the sideline, because the games are at such high speed and intensity in the playoffs. It's going to take him a game or two to probably get back into it. But I think if he's ready to go, you've got an opportunity to win Game 1 on the road, or at least split. You've got to take it, and he's got to be out on the floor. And if they can get any kind of advantage in the first couple of games, get that home court advantage back, I think they've got to do it. I think he's got to play, and then they've got to do everything they can to win the series as quickly as possible. You just can't waste games in the finals. If you're fit enough to play, you've got to go and do it. And I think he will. I think he might be a little bit sloppy, but we're going to get basically a max effort from him. He's an elite athlete, as good as it gets in the league. So I think behind LeBron, you probably look at Giannis as maybe the most durable guy in the league.
Yeah. So now prediction time, Das. So unless there's anything else you want to touch on, probably the only thing that we didn't really mention, but I think most people know now, is you probably give the coaching edge to Phoenix, wouldn't you say? I probably think, Monty's a better coach than Bud. I know I've probably been surprised by, Bud being in this position, given the fact we probably thought for a while he was a regular season coach. But at the end of the day, he's had something to do with the team being in the position they are. So as much as it's the players getting it done, he's at least had to contribute something. But I still would give the edge to Phoenix with the coaching side of things, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think so. It's very slight. I think it's, the trust and the, camaraderie that Phoenix have got. I feel like that looks as strong as any team in the league. And they look like a team that's destined to go all the way in terms of how together they are and the trust that they've gained in each other. I think, the Bucks are only a KD toe over the line from potentially, blaming it all on Bud and getting rid of him. So, but having said that, he's made through it. He's made through that. And you talked about Connaughton as an X factor. He's clearly the guy that Bud has trusted in the bench unit. He's the number one guy that they trust off the bench. So, I think Bud still, has some demons to exercise in this way to potentially go out and winning a championship. But I feel like that he can make some adjustments as well. He did make a couple of good adjustments at the end of the Clippers series, and I think when it comes down to the final, surely, if things are going the wrong way in back-to-back games, he's got to be able to change the game plan a little bit, because that's definitely been the knock on him. And I think there's an opportunity for Bud to do that. But I think you're right, that Phoenix have a slight edge in terms of they know exactly who they are and what they're doing, whether they're backed up against a wall or they're in the lead.
Yeah. Okay, so official prediction, Das. Who do you have, and in how many games?
I think the home court advantage will potentially pay a little bit if it goes to a game 7. Then I really, really like Phoenix, but for me in this matchup, I think the best player on the court in the series I'm thinking it will be Giannis. I think he will put his foot down and show everyone why he's, even though we can't always, we don't. I don't think his game is perfect. He's not necessarily the most skilled basketball player in the world, but I think he is the most dominant, forceful, and will be the difference in this series. So I think he'll get it done. I think the Bucks will win with Giannis MVP. I think they'll win in 6.
Wow. So obviously we've both tossed and turned about which side to take. I'd probably lean towards the Phoenix home court being what sways it for me, and I've got Suns in 7. So I think Phoenix will really look to attack and make the most out of any sort of pick and roll they get, where they get to face the big man. So CP3 going up against Lopez, or Booker going up against Lopez, and really making the most of any mismatches they can find. They seem to be such a bloody clinical team, and they're so efficient in the half court. We've spoken about that and throughout the regular season, and we know they may not be able to get, run many plays, but I think there's something about this Suns team this year, and I've probably overlooked, that how they played in the Western Conference Finals, and we were both on the Clippers to win in 7. But after seeing them manage to pull out some victories out of their arse in game 1 and 2, it just feels like if the game's close, they can find a way to win, and they just have so many options. Whereas it seems if the game's close, for Milwaukee, they really have to rely on a lot from, Middleton and Drew to be the closers, because it doesn't seem like they can really go to Giannis with teams just setting up the wall and forcing Giannis to be a jump shooter. So with most of these games probably going to be coming down to, the last 5 minutes and crucial possessions, I probably rely on Phoenix to find a way to be able to get it done. And just the multiple options they have, they seem to be just a little bit deeper as well with, other guys we've spoken off the bench with, your Cam Johnsons, your Torrey Crays, your Cam Paynes. They just seem to have just a few more guys that could come out of the woodworks and give you 10 points or 15 points in a quarter and just give you a spark that, you didn't think you'd get. Whereas I think the Bucks are, gosh, they even if, Giannis is back to his normal self and playing a lot, you're still going to potentially need a few really good performances out of some of your other guys, whether that's a Lopez or Tucker to hit 3 threes, or even Forbes come on, hit a few threes, because they're pretty thin. Otherwise, it's if Giannis comes back, then it's Connaughton and Portis really off the bench that are the only 2 guys you can rely on, right? I'm not sure who else they can. I wouldn't bank on another Jeff Teague. What do you have, 14, 15 points in that closeout game against
11.
Atlanta? 11. So, and it felt like every shot he made was good. So every shot he took, was going to go in. So I think things sort of lean towards Phoenix there. And I'm not bold enough to say they can get it done in 6. I think it'll be so hard for them to get a win in Milwaukee. Milwaukee seem to play really well in that sort of, that in front of their home fans. And, they've at least shown they can, win the ugly games. If you want to go back to all the way back to the game 3, Brooklyn, Milwaukee that we've spoken about before, the 88-86 Brick Fest, that they credit to them. They found a way to win. But I think the reason I've gone in 7 is, despite all of that, you've mentioned it as well, is that Milwaukee have proven they're a team that doesn't throw in the towel, and that they're going to fight. So even if Phoenix are to win the first 2 games at home, the series would be far from done. I don't think you can basically make a call after that. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be, I think, and I'm hoping that it's going to be the series that we were praying for. In the playoffs, if all the guys were healthy, I think we're finally going to get that to round off this postseason. But I'll settle on Phoenix in 7, but it's a tough one.
I think we're definitely in for an epic.
Yeah.
It feels that way. It doesn't feel like any team has a big advantage over the other, and it's hard to see one team blowing out the other one in this. I feel we've also got players with 0 championships. Everyone on both teams, no one's ever won a championship. So this is all brand new to these guys, and I think there'll be a lot of energy and kind of, mental effort that's really pushed out in game 1. I think it's going to take a lot out of them. Game 1, there'll be a lot of hype, a lot of energy, a lot of, they'll be desperate to get out there and perform on the biggest stage. So yeah, I think we're in for a long series, and can't wait to see who's gonna make a name for themselves, and who's gonna make that big performance that makes them one of the greatest players of all time. I think, yeah, we're gonna have to take it game by game for sure. It's gonna be storyline after storyline. Who are you thinking for game one? You thinking Phoenix will win game one?
Yeah, I just think Phoenix will win game one just because of the Giannis factor that you mentioned before. That if he comes back and has 40 and 15 rebounds, it's like hand up. I'll more than accept that as and
tough
just
to bank on that.
But I don't think you're going to get that. So yeah, I think it'll be a close game, but in the end, just a little bit too much from Phoenix. So
you assume that at home that their bench players will play better, and then
exactly.
vice versa when it comes to Milwaukee. So what can you get out of your role players when you're on the road in a big finals game and you're down a little bit? That'll be very interesting when we get to that point.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Das Bucks in 6, and I've got Suns in 7. So Olympic stuff. So there's obviously been some news that has dropped about that. There's several points to touch on, but we should kick things off with speaking about the boys and the Australian Boomers. So their final squad was announced. Rather than sort of going through it man by man, I think can just hit on a couple of things that stood out for me, and then we can sort of go from there. The first is that the lack of depth I think they have at the big man spot. That's kind of worrying for me.
They're going small.
Gone small. So obviously Baines, Jock Landale, and Duop Reith. Is that how you say his name? Reith?
Yep.
Reith.
Duop Reith.
Duop Reith are the only 3 bigs on the roster. So that obviously, as you say, indicates towards a.
Well, they got Nick Kay. They got Nick Kay as well.
How tall is he? Is he tall?
He's a big guy. He's about 6'8", 6'9".
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, he's power forward for Perth last year in the NBL. He's a big body. He was really good for them in the World Cup. I think he'll probably be ahead in the rotation over Reith.
Okay, so but I suppose the overall thinking from that is, they it might not affect them in the group stages, but when it comes to potentially facing off against some other opponents in quarters or semis, that it could come back to bite him, because I wasn't that impressed. I know you probably weren't that impressed with Baines' season in particular for the Raptors. Maybe he plays better with the green and gold and with that Aussie culture and spirit, but didn't obviously like what I saw from him. Landale had a good year, obviously being part of the Melbourne team that won the NBL. So that is one thing that stood out for me for the lack of depth. Then the others is just probably to speak about the snubs, right? So the probably notable were, I guess, Josh Giddey, even a guy like Xavier Cooks could have been potentially a good contributor, and a guy I actually like and enjoy is the lefty, Brock Modem. So interesting that, as you say, they've gone with the small ball and gone with the glut of wings to obviously take into their Olympics campaign. So, but what do you sort of make of the Boomers final squad? Whether it's touching on any of the points I've made or you've got of your own, how do you feel about this Olympics? How do you feel about the Olympics now, knowing that the final group for the final squad for the Boomers?
I think it's kind of it's taken shape in terms of what Gorgon's looking for and the style that he wants to play. It reminds me of what they've done this year, what he did this year with the Illawarra Hawks. They played Sam Froling at their center a lot of the time, and he was way undersized. They mixed it up with a lot of zone, and they played their athletic long wings a lot of minutes, and basically built their whole game around defense and then getting easier buckets in transition. So it feels like that's kind of the squad that he's picked, not going for much depth in the front court, relying on Landale a lot and Baines. I think what you said about Baines and how he struggled in the in the NBA season, I think this is huge for him because he has played some of his best basketball for the Boomers in previous stints. So I think it'll be a bit of a weight off shoulders for him to come and play his game. He'll be absolutely crucial to what we're doing. When you look at the other teams, there's only 3 groups. There's only 12 teams. So if you look at teams that have a big interior presence, there actually isn't much out there. The United States group doesn't have a real genuine center outside of probably Adebayo. France have obviously got Rudy Gobert, and they've been a team that we've really struggled to get over in the middle rounds, France for sure. But there is no Serbia. They didn't make it through the qualifying, so we're not going to have to go up against a guy like Jokic. And Spain have always got some nice sides. They got both Gasol brothers coming back for this, and Gasol was a bit of a problem for us in that semi-final of the World Cup. So although we're a little bit small, I think compared to other teams in the comp, where there's not necessarily a team that's got a big guy that we're desperately going to be at a disadvantage. So, but I think he's put some faith in guys that necessarily haven't proven much on the international stage. I think about Dante, and as much as he was basically a lock and a guarantee to be a multiple Olympian, multiple World Cup attendee, this is basically his first go with the Boomers in his career. If you can believe that, it feels like he's been around for years. And at the same time, his NBA career has been so up and down and injury riddled that it's just impossible to know what kind of player we're going to get. But, Gorgon has taken a risk on him, and he feels like he's seen enough from him and what he's done at camp to have a big impact. And I think it's absolutely critical as to what we're going to get from him. What are we going to get from him offensively? Can he shoot the ball at any kind of good rate from the 3-point line? And obviously he's going to have to show his defensive prowess. I think that's probably going to be an essential part of he's going to be a big X factor for our role to complement, our experienced backcourt with Dellavedova and Mills. I like the additions of the Australians in the 11th and 12th option. Like they've gone with Goulding and they've gone with Nathan Sobey. I think they're both clearly the best offensive players in the NBL. They've shown it. They can shoot the hell out of the ball. Sobey's really athletic and quick and getting to the basket. I would like to see him get utilised. I don't think he was utilised very much in the World Cup. He kind of sat on the bench a lot of the time, and I think it's interesting to see if we can get anything from Josh Green. The Mavericks player. I did like what I saw from him at times. Especially defensively and shooting the ball for the Mavericks in his limited minutes throughout the season. But I think he definitely has an opportunity to potentially grab a big role in this Australian team. As a 3-and-D wing guy, and I think the FIBA game might lean a bit towards him because he's had a bit more experience of that growing up and playing in Australia. So I think those selections will kind of, if they hit, then we'll be looking at a potentially, medal winning team. If they go the opposite way and they don't come off, then I think you can look to the selections as we took a risk on guys who may not necessarily have proven themselves so much to complement our core. It's still going to be absolutely crucial what we get from Joe Ingles and Paddy. That's, kind of where our bread is buttered, and with Baines as well. So also expect big things out of Landau. Thought he was awesome in the NBL season. And I think we're primed as any other team. The US team is really, really scary when you look at their lineup and just how versatile and how much shooting they have. But other than that, I back our chances, against any other team in this Olympic run. I think one team that I would love to see us play against, but on the other hand, could be a tough matchup, is Slovenia. I know they're not in our pool, but if we have to go up against Doncic, it'll be real tough,
And Vladko Concha, or whatever his name is, the Denver Nuggets bench guy. He shot the hell out of the ball in that freaking game against Lithuania. God.
Dragic's brother's not bad as well.
Yeah, Zoran.
They've got a white guy, Mike Toby, who played a bit of
Virginia
summer league and from Virginia. Yeah. Your classic Slovenian Mike Toby. And when you look at our group, I think we're expected to come out of this group. I know that Germany stormed their way. It was basically a big upset for them to make it through to the Olympics, even without Schroeder. They got a massive game from our boy Mo Wagner. So maybe Wagner could be a bit of a problem for us. They also got Isaac Bonga on their team. Italy will be tough. They always have some veterans. I think Alinari will join their team potentially. I'm not sure if Bellinelli's playing, but they're a really good basketball nation, and we should be able to get the win over Nigeria. So, apparently Mike Brown's coaching Nigeria, which is quite interesting.
Because Monty Morris is on that team as well. I think that's a reason why. I think that's a reason why Monty Morris committed to play for him, was because Mike Brown as well was.
Precious Achua and Joshua Kogi. So yeah, they got
Interesting.
a little bit of NBA talent. So
Yeah.
well, I'm sure there'll be no easy games. That's for sure.
No, I don't
in the
think so.
Olympics,
Yeah.
but no, I'm happy with the selection of the team.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely element of risk there. I like Brock Modem as well, but obviously the way and the style that we're playing, Gorgon, I think you don't think that Modem can defend the way that we want him to for this kind of the speed and the team that we're trying to run out on the floor. And yeah, it'll be a guy like Cooks. I think he really would potentially definitely would have been in this team if it wasn't for him missing basically the whole NBL season. So I feel like he maybe just doesn't have the doesn't have the form right now to make the squad. But definitely for all you listeners out there, going and tune into these games because there's going to be high quality games in the NBL style, the FIBA style. It'll be really high quality basketball, and we're definitely seeing some of the best players in the world out there.
Yeah, and time difference is no excuse because it's in Japan and that works perfectly in our favor. I think we're only an hour or two ahead of Japan. So games that are on at nighttime, I think kick off normally around 6 for us. I think there are some of the group stages, the games that I saw. So definitely won't be too many. Well, there could be a couple of late-ish type games that tip off around, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or something like that. But definitely nothing out of the that's too difficult for any Australians to watch. So no excuse from that side of things. Your boy, so you just mentioned him with Slovenia. Anyone who's been keeping up with the news would have seen Doncic's triple double against Lithuania, who have Valanciunas and Sabonis, and they've got plenty of other good Europeans in their team. They're normally that Lithuania team stacked with just quality European pros that play in Europe. So definitely no easy team to beat. And for Doncic to be able to get a triple double, it's not just the fact that he was able to do that, but anyone who knows FIBA, they play 10-minute quarters, not 12-minute quarters like the NBA. So it kind of makes it even more impressive that he was able to rack up those numbers, whether 30, 11, and 11 or something like that. I can't remember exactly the specifics, but nonetheless, obviously he was just dominating. And he did one of those passes against Portland where he's like dribbling and he just like throws it behind his head to someone who was behind him. So in this game, it was Vladko that he threw it to. And I think, I can't remember who it was in the Portland game, maybe threw it behind to Kleber or someone else. So I think that was pretty awesome. I don't know if you were up watching it, Dallas, but I definitely know you're tuned into the highlights. Anyway, so how do you look? It's a very dumb question to say. How do you feel about that? Because everyone would know the answer, but I suppose Slovenia will be your second team in the Olympics, won't they?
For sure, I think they're a massive dark horse. Like, not that they have that much depth necessarily, but they've got a lot of shooting, but just Doncic is completely dominant, and it's not like he's transitioning from the NBA to the FIBA game. Like, the FIBA game is his bread and butter. Like, he grew up playing that. He was MVP of the EuroLeague. He was basically the best FIBA rules player in the world before he came to the NBA, and he's just riding an absolute wave of confidence now that they've had a huge win over a big upset over Lithuania to make it. I think they're extremely dangerous, and they're definitely a team to watch. The style that they'll be playing will be similar to what you're seeing from the Mavericks. Heck of a lot of pick and roll, heck of a lot of, 5 guys standing on the perimeter and Doncic trying to get all the way to the basket and use his frame and his array of shots. So definitely a team to watch, and very excited to see him playing again and playing at a high level because, I hope that he rolls that over into an absolutely huge season again for the Mavericks.
Who's in Slovenia's group? I mean, pool. Do you know?
So they've got a tough pool.
Okay.
Spain obviously are in that pool, and they're they're coming off the win in the World Cup only a couple of years ago. They are quite an aging team though, Spain. So we're dealing with like Rubio and both the Gasol brothers, and
is Rudy
Hernan
Fernandez
Gomez
still in that team?
Oh, potentially.
Do you remember the
Maybe
Portland
he
guy,
retired.
Rudy Fernandez? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, they got the Hernan Gomez brothers as well.
Oh,
so,
gotcha.
they're a team who knows each other really well. That's probably
Yeah.
their best asset, is that they've played together a long time and they're going to be very together. And the Argentinian team will be tough, maybe not as tough as previous years, but they were a silver medalist at the last World Cup. They've got Campazzo, who I thought had a really good rookie season. Gabriel Deck, who signed late in the season with Oklahoma
Okay,
City, is
see.
definitely a guy to watch. And yeah,
Is
Argentina
Scola
at
playing
4.
for him, or is he done?
I think surely he's done. He's like 42 or something.
He keeps
But
playing.
he was all tournament first team in the World Cup, which is completely unbelievable at 40 years old. But they've also got Japan in their pool, which is probably an easy win. But they have a couple of NBA players as well. So Slovenia, that's a tough pool. Spain are definitely the big one for them to get over, and Argentina will be a tough game. But I don't see that there's any team that Doncic can't beat. Basically single handedly, he's a freak.
Yeah, that'll be, as you say, if there's any other sort of team to tune into other than the Boomers and potentially the US, it's probably Slovenia because, as you say, it'll be a Luka carry job. And obviously any European team is passionate, but it seems like Slovenia could be riding on a high and take this sort of momentum that you say they've got from the qualifiers and take that to Tokyo. So it'd be very interesting to see. Would not surprise me if Luka finds a way to pull his Slovenia team out of that first group. So definitely there's something to keep an eye on. Now, another thing that happened, and probably unless there's something else to touch on, the last thing we speak about was Canada lost to the Czech Republic in their qualifier, and the Czech Republic only have Satoransky as their NBA player. So not great for Canada, who is that they haven't qualified in, I don't know how many years it's been, but they've basically struggled. That they haven't qualified at least for the last several Olympics. And obviously the most recent one now, and the adds to sort of the pain they've experienced. But they have an absolute stacked team in terms of NBA talent. Nick Nurse is their coach. That some of the names that played for them in this sort of qualifying tournament: Wiggins, RJ Barrett, Corey Joseph, Nikhil Alexander-Walker, Lou Dort, Trey Lyles, Michael Mulder from Golden State, Dwight Powell played, obviously from your Mavs. They were missing some guys, so obviously Jamal Murray's injured, and SGA didn't play. Boucher, Ken Birch, Brissett, your boy, Dylan Brooks, your boy, Brandon Clark, Kelly Olynyk, Tristan Thompson. So they were missing quite a lot of guys, and it kind of only goes to show how stacked they are with when all of their guys are available. But the fact of the matter is they lost to Satoransky. In the end, he hit a bank game winner in OT over Lou Dort. So, gosh, them being in the Olympics would have definitely made it difficult for some of these other teams. I'm not sure which pool they would have fallen into, but the fact that a team like that didn't make it, I think it only really helps, all of these other guys that are in the group, because what is that I just mentioned? 14, 15 NBA guys that would have been on that Canada team. So the best thing to come from it is for the guys that are, the other teams that are in the Olympics, they probably don't have to worry about facing that Canada team. But is it maybe the fault that they were too stacked? I don't know.
I think they were too small. That's what I thought.
Okay.
When you called out all those names of guys who weren't playing, they were all forwards. When the lineup that they put out there in that matchup against the Czech Republic, they ended up having to run quite a lot of minutes with Anthony Bennett at the 5. So it became basically an all-round outside game. It became a battle of guards. And the fact is that Satoransky, similar to Doncic, he's a bit of an underrated guard, I think, in the NBA.
Yeah, he is good.
He is pretty solid, but that's his bread and butter, the FIBA game. That style of play. He's grown up on it, and he's played multiple times for the national team and done a really good job. At the last World Cup, they took us right to the line in the quarterfinal. We only beat them by, I think, 6 points in the quarterfinal, and their whole game was based around Satoransky. And to be fair to the rest of their team, they have some really good shooting. These European teams, they teach shooting from a young age, and they're definitely some of the best in the world at shooting the ball. So, not surprising that they pushed Canada right to the end. Obviously, pretty lucky with that clutch shot from off the backboard from Satoransky, but they also had that game in the bag before Wiggins hit that desperation three. So I think from Canada's perspective, they're only just getting their shit together with their team. Nurse only just took over just 2 weeks before the World Cup or something, played a few practice game against us, and we basically, wiped the floor with them a couple of times. So just a matter of him, Nurse getting the trust of those NBA players, and definitely, getting a formidable front court's important. But getting the trust and getting those NBA players to buy into playing for Canada. I think that's definitely been a problem for them, and it's basically been a problem for Canada basketball since the Steve Nash era. So because he played with them at the Olympics here way back in 2000 in Sydney, and basically since then he's had a separation from the Canadian national team because of disagreements in the way that it was run and the politics behind it. So I think they're turning a corner in terms of getting the organisation and getting the character of their team right. And obviously, you touched on all of their talent, and a lot of that's very young talent in the NBA. So I think, coming up to the next World Cup and the next Olympics, they're definitely going to be a team that can challenge the likes of US and Australia and stuff like that. Czech Republic, the pool that they're in is the US's pool. So it's the US and France. There's probably the pool of death right there with France and the US, and could have been Canada, but now it's Czech Republic, and then Iran rolls out that group. So yeah, you can pretty much safely expect that the US and France will probably be the only watchable matchup in that group.
Yeah. Is France? Do they have their normal group of guys? I haven't really been tuned into them. Is it beyond Gobert? Is Batum suiting up for him? Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Batum's in the list, Fournier, and Gobert. So, yeah, expect another tough outfit from France. They're a very proud basketball nation.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, that probably takes care of things there from the Olympic side of things. Unless there was anything else to touch on, that's probably where we'd leave things as well for the NBA. Obviously, again, it kicks off tomorrow. I think with it being in Phoenix, it might not be until 11 or midday tip. Being on the West Coast there, I'm not too sure, but no, it should be exciting nonetheless. And Darcy and I will be back to probably do another pod halfway through the series. Unless there's any other news that we desperately need to speak about, we'll get back on sooner. But yeah, it does tip off at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So yeah, really, really excited about that one. Das obviously just said before, he's got Bucks in 6. I've got Phoenix in 7. And before we know it, once this is done, then the Olympics kicks off 20-something of July. I think so. That's, just bang on 2 weeks away, really, maybe a bit longer. So a lot to look forward to, and we'll can't wait to sort of speak about it and cover it all and see how it unfolds, starting with this NBA Finals series.
It just keeps rolling on with the basketball, doesn't it? Because we've been doing it all year, but it's been a long season. But we're coming to the biggest storylines of the year, the finals. There's nothing like it. It's I feel like even though we might not get back to a pod to midway through the series, there'll be some big storylines even out of game one. So everyone make sure you tune in, and we'll try to get engaged with you guys on Instagram as well. So keep an eye out for our stories.
Yep, definitely. Okay. Well, enjoy this game 1, guys, and game 2, and even potentially game 3. And Darcy and I will be back before you know it to recap and then look ahead to the rest of the series. So thanks again for listening and tuning in. As always, Darcy and I say it, but reach out if you have any other opinions, perspectives, you agree, you disagree. Darcy and I are all about that, engaging in some chat around b-ball. Darcy and I have all the time in the world to do that. So we hope you enjoy listening to this episode, and we'll speak to you guys very shortly.
Peace out, guys.
Money. Bang. Sadaransky off the backboard.